And now, for the week of February 6th, Photoshop TV is on the air.
Welcome to Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Kloskowski.
All right, welcome everybody to another prenatal episode of Photoshop TV, broadcasting from the headquarters of the National Association of Photoshop Professionals.
Today's episode is brought to you by Epson and the Epson Print Academy.
Also, iStockPhoto.com, makers of the world's largest and fastest growing digital stock photography collection in the world.
Well said, well said. And B&H Photo. Go check them out at bhphotovideo.com. It's the coolest place to buy all your camera gear in the world. It's where all of us buy all of our camera gear, so check them out. Hey, welcome everybody to another episode. We have got a slam-packed episode today, and by we I mean these guys here with me. I'm Scott Kelby, and joining me in the studio, as always, rocking the husky, it's Matt Kloskowski.
Welcome back, everybody.
And also representing the great country of Canada, our friends across the border, wearing the red and white colors, Mr. Dave Cross.
Bonjour.
Well, everybody, we've got so much stuff, we got to get right to it. One thing, mentioned last week, we're going to have a giveaway of a stylus, an Epson Stylus Photo R2400. We're giving one today away with lots of other junk, too. Lots of... I said junk. I didn't mean junk. I meant crap is what I meant. A bunch of other crap. So stick around. But first, we're going to get things started right off the bat with Mr. Kloskowski. He's going to give us a tip. What do you got this week, Matt?
Yes, I've got a tip. I'm actually got this tip from Daniel Sorensen. He's got a book out there called Photoshop CS2 for Advertising and Marketing. It's a cool little trick on how to take handwritten text and put it into a document. Not a signature, not that signature thing. It's a little more of a special effect on just how to do handwriting or take a handwriting.
You're going to cheat, though. You're using a pen, right?
Well, no, I'm actually taking a scan document.
The old scanning trick. Okay,
all right,
let's see what you got.
Let's take a look here. All right, so as I mentioned, I've got a couple of photos open here in Photoshop, and what we're going to do is take this handwriting and we're going to put it into the grayscale document that you see back here, but we're going to kind of do a nice special effect with it to make it kind of interact with the document behind it, which is actually going to become some flames. So if you look at the handwriting, these are actual files from the book. He gives us files. He gives you files that you can download and follow along with. So I'm going to go to this handwriting document and copy it. And then I'm going to go to the document he's got here called Flames. And I'm going to go to Image, Mode, and change this over. Make sure it's an RGB color. And go over to the Channels palette. Create a new channel and then just paste in that text that you copied from the previous document. And then Control-D to deselect. Now we go back to the Layers palette here, and what we'll want to do is we want to actually give these flames some color. So I'm going to press Control or Command U. And this is going to bring up Hue Saturation. Now go to the Colorize, click that Colorize checkbox, and then pick your hue, take your hue up to somewhere around, I don't know, 27 or 30, and then I'm going to bump that saturation all the way up to around 60 here.
So is it 27 or 30?
27 or 30, between 27
One
and 30.
One of those two work.
Sorry. All right, then I'm going to bump the saturation up to 60, so everybody's a comedian on this show. All right, when you get there, click OK, and you can see our grayscale document actually now has some flame. It almost looks like fire in the background here, but we're going to take it a step further. I'm going to press Command or Control-J. It's going to duplicate that layer, and then I'm going to change the blend mode to color dodge and drop the opacity down. You see that? See how it almost makes it look like an explosion back there. All right. Next thing that we want to do here is we need to get our text onto the front of this document. So we are going to go to the Channels palette, and I'm going to Control-click onto the text here, and you can see it puts a selection around all of our text. And then you can just go back into your Layers palette here. We're going to go create a Curves adjustment layer, and watch what happens. Right now you don't see anything, but when I start to take the curve, bump the curve up a little bit, you'll start to see the text appear in the background here. So you can start to see the dark color text in the background. You can manipulate the curve. It really depends on what your text looks like here, but you can start to see the text. Just click OK. I'm going to show you a little trick. If you don't like the text to be black, just Alt or Option click on that layer mask and then press Control-I. It flips it over to white, and now when I Alt click on there, now the text is actually yellow, so it looks like it's showing through the flames here. And then if you want to, you can just come in here, crop out the edges of the image, and move your text around, fit it into place here. We probably don't want to have too much of it in that black area. And you've got your effect here. And if you need to adjust it, you can always just drop the opacity down, and if it's too bright in some areas. Again, remember, use that curves adjustment layer, though, because you can always come back in here into the layers palette, and you can adjust it if you need to change the color of the text. All right, so thank you very much to Daniel for letting me steal a tip from your book. Again, it was Photoshop CS2 for advertising and marketing.
And now you just took one little part of a longer tutorial.
No, that was
right?
the whole book, actually.
Oh, okay, the whole book is...
It's 198 pages. I'm doing that. I condensed it down.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
All right. Dave, I believe you have something for us.
I do have
now
something,
as well.
and what I want to do is show people a little bit about using the bridge. A lot of people have bridge and kind of use it in Photoshop, but I want to make sure you really take advantage of all the things you can do in bridge, not just in Photoshop.
Cool.
Let's take a look.
Okay.
Now, there's no question a lot of people have Bridge, of course, installed because it does come with Photoshop, but I wonder if you're taking full advantage of it because there's so much more you can do outside of Photoshop. So let's take a look here. I've got Bridge open. I deliberately have it pointed to a folder that has a variety of things in it. Here's an InDesign document, and if I click on that and I scroll down here to see what's in here, it will tell me what fonts are used in this InDesign document and what swatches. Here's a Keynote file. Now, I can't look at it, but if I double-click, it would launch Keynote. Same with Word. So a lot of people think it's only Adobe applications that work. It's not. Any application, if you can see the icon, you can double-click to launch it.
Man, I'll be using that Word
Illustrator file
all the time.
Okay, but here's one where you can use it. Okay, how many times has this happened to you? Maybe not you,
What?
but to the rest of you, where you download a PDF file from some website and it uses some name that's totally nondescript. You end up with like 5 or 6 PDF files and you have no idea which one's which. Instead of opening them, check this out. In Bridge, you click on the PDF, and right here in the preview, you can actually look inside the document to see the contents of it and determine if you have the right one. Now
This is a miracle.
It's miraculous. Here's an MP3 file. I could actually play the MP3 file. So if I wasn't sure, again, if it was the right one, instead of having to launch a separate sound application, and the same rule applies for just about everything. Here's a movie. So I click on that movie, and it's Dave Cross teaching us how to use gradients, apparently. Yes, it's Dave Cross. So if you're trying to use Bridge, you can just make sure you do it not only for Photoshop documents, for everything. It's very easy to do, and just all happens automatically. You don't do anything else except that. Basically, just point it to the folder. When you click on the files, look in that preview, you can see the contents of just about anything. Now, there's one other thing to mention. When you're in Bridge and you have things like PDF files, if you're using the slideshow in Bridge, those PDF files will show page by page in the slideshow. So just another way
Even
to take
better.
advantage of
It gets better and better and better.
We try to make it. I mean, when I personally worked on Bridge and its development, that was a key feature that I...
You worked on
No,
Bridge?
not at all.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, wow,
Now,
I'm
Scott,
impressed.
You have a tip, but before we get to that, we want to tell a little bit more about this week's prize, because
Yes.
it's a big one.
It's a
literally.
big one. It's from our friends at the Epson Print Academy, and they have sent an incredible... We're going to bring on a special guest to bring it on. Brett from our web department is going to actually... We needed someone big enough to actually carry this thing. Come on in. Here's Brett Nyquist. He's from our web department, and this is what you're going to win this week. Can we actually see all of Brett? I know the... Come on, a little further in. Okay. And there's Brett. There we go. We have to actually pan upwards. He is actually 11 foot, 6 inches, and he's in our web department, and he has to put his computer so high, it's crazy. It's way up here. But anyway, this is it. We had to get the biggest guy in here to hold it. This thing weighs 800 pounds. It costs $800, but it prints that are 800 times better than anything you've ever seen. We're giving away this and much more. So big hand to Brett for coming on. Yay, Brett! Woo! Awesome, awesome. All right, go back and post things. All right. Do whatever it is that he does over there.
The website.
Web stuff. I don't know. Hey, my tip is a two-part tip today. We're going to do the first part first, which is what we always like to do. Is if I'm doing a two-part
What a
tip,
concept.
I want to do the first part first. So
Amazing.
let's do the first part first. All right, this tip was actually inspired by some comments that we've seen on the blog lately. And if you haven't been to the blog, it's photoshoptv.com. But the comments were about how do you collage photos or montage photos. Some people call it collage, some people call it montage. Some people call it blending photos together. So we're going to do a two-parter. First, we're going to start off. Oh, before I do, though, I have to do one thing. Tim, this one's for you. We're going to start by opening an image. And this is going to be kind of the base of our collage right here. And it's going to be, we're going to do kind of a collage of scientific lab stuff. So we'll start off with this image. Then we're going to open up the image we want to collage or blend with it. And that's this image right here. It's a much larger image. So what I'm going to do is just drag it on top. Like this. Don't show again. See this? Don't show again. I'm happy to see that go away. Okay, here we go. Now let's close this other one. We don't need it anymore. All right, now, this is what you have here is a really, really bad collage. It is a collage of two images. It's just the blend is just awful. So here's what we do. It's a three-part process. Step number one is you click right here on the layer mask icon, right there. Click right there. That's step one. Step two is you go and you click on the gradient tool over here in the tool palette. And then make sure you have the black to white gradient. So I'm going to click right here, make sure you've got the black to white gradient right there. Then step three is, make sure I really have that, there we go. Step three is you're going to click and drag in your image. And you see how it just blended the edge away there, makes a nice soft edge. Now there's a perfect blend between the two. That's all you have to do. There's the three steps. And in fact, I can just move this over a little bit. Let me switch to the move tool here. And just move it. There we go. So you can kind of position it where you want it. Now we'll open up another image to collage with this. Let's go ahead and open up, you guessed it, Lab 3. All right, we're going to grab this image and drag it on top. There we go. And kind of position it where you want it, something like this. We can close the other image because we don't need it anymore. If I can actually move it, there we go. Helps if you make those noises. Okay, now, 3 steps again. Our 3 steps were, step number 1, click right here. Step number 2, click right there on the gradient tool. And step number 3, now we're going to click and drag. Now I'm going to click from where I want to be transparent up to where I want to be solid. Just like that. And you click and you drag, and basically it creates this kind of little blend from there to there. Now, do you see how you can kind of see through the person's arm right there? If you wanted to fix this, what you could do is go grab the brush tool, and we'll get a brush, and you can paint over this. I want to make the brush size a little bigger using the bracket keys on my keyboard. And you can paint over this just like this, and that becomes solid. As long as you're painting in white, this area now becomes solid. So now it looks like his hand is actually over it. So the rest of it blends, but this part right here is now solid. Okay, so that's just getting us started on this collage. That's how you blend these. We're going to take it one step further in just a minute, but this is the basic steps. Step 1 is layer mask icon. Step 2, hit the gradient tool. And step 3, drag. Now when I come back later and do the second part of the tip, I'm going to show you a different way to blend, so we're going to build on that same tutorial. But now it's time for traffic and weather with Matt Kloskowski in the Storm Team Weather Center. No. It's time for some Photoshop news with our buddy Matt Kloskowski. He's rocking the house.
All right, so first this week, Adobe has released a new version of the Camera Raw plugin. It's up to version 3.3 now, and it's actually got support for 17 new cameras. So we'll put a link to where you can go download it on the PhotoshopTV.com website. Also, in other Adobe news, they've announced that Lightroom is going to be their very first application that supports the Intel-based Mac. So since it's still in beta, you'll probably wind up seeing some new beta releases that actually support those Intel-based Macs. And finally, go check out digitalcanvasawards.com. It's a NAF-sponsored contest, and it's the winner's actually been picked. So you can go to the website, you can see the winner, you can see the artwork, and you can also check out the cool prize, which was a trip to France. So go to digitalcanvasawards.com. Now that's it for the news this week. Back to you guys for the sports.
Thanks, Matt. We're here with the latest Photoshop sports.
Strangely enough, there is only one score in the world of sports, and that is Adobe 1, Apple 0.
Ooh, ouch,
Well, that means,
woo. Okay, sorry. Hey, let's talk about last week's winner. Last week we had a winner of a contest, right? They won stuff. And what did they win? They won the Illustrator CS2 Killer Tips book written by Dave Cross and Matt Rock and the Housekeep Kloskowski. They won a ticket to Photoshop World, a full conference pass. They won the Adobe bag and Dell's DJ Diddy.
Oh no. Make it stop.
All right. Okay. The lucky winner of that MP3 player, the DJ Diddy. No, just kidding. Dana Dawson of Maplewood.
MN,
Missouri, Montana. It's got to be Missouri, Montana.
Now
it's one of those
we
states.
should probably also tell people what the answer was, because the question
answer, what was the question?
What is missing
DJ
from
Diddy?
this dialog box? And the dialog box was selective color and what was missing was absolute. That's the correct
Absolute. So I think a lot of liquor drinkers would get that one. What's missing is always missing from any Photoshop dialog box is absolute.
They're going to need it after launching.
Yeah, we're going to get all kinds of. We're going to get mail from this. Like it's just not
On
going to
many
be
levels.
not going to be pretty. Hey, also we talked about this week's contest. Of course, there's the Epson Stylus Photo, the R2400. That's the printer that I use myself. It's the greatest printer I've ever used. Just absolutely. It's a pro photography printer. It's not for printing soccer photos. It's for printing photos you really care about. So, also, you don't just win that, but you win a full conference pass to Photoshop World, the full ride, the whole deal. So, anyway, we're going to take a break, right?
Yeah, we'll do that contest, this week's contest, right after this.
Stick around.
All right, this week's question for the fabulous prize of the Epson printer and the Photoshop
And the
World
ticket.
is where in Photoshop do you find an option called dab? And for the first time ever, I'm going to give you a hint. It's not in the brushes palette, so don't bother looking there.
It's not in the
Not in
brushes
there.
palette.
So send your answer to photoshoptv@photoshopuser.com. And there's probably some deadline that Matt will very quickly inform us of at some point, or we'll just post it across the bottom.
When's the
February
deadline?
10th.
Figure that out.
February 10th.
February 10th came a voice from off stage. All right. Hey, also, if you're coming down to Photoshop World, and if you win the ticket, then you'll want airfare. If you haven't won the ticket, come on down. We'll be doing a live broadcast from there. Dave Cross will be teaching there. I'll be teaching there. Matt Klaskowski will be rocking the house there. In fact, Matt's doing a late night session on scripting, isn't he? Called
Yes, he
Photoshop for Geeks. So if you're coming down to Miami for Photoshop World, there's some great airfares out right now. We just checked Expedia.com, and they had some good airfares. Now, these airfares are good today, which is not the day you're watching this probably, but go to Expedia.com. There's some great flights. They've got flights from Atlanta down to Miami Beach for 163 buckaroos round trip on American Airlines. If you're coming from Indianapolis, it's 241 on American Airlines, and from D.C., it's only 183 bucks to fly down round trip, and it'll be freezing in all three of those cities, but in beautiful Miami Beach, where we're doing the Photoshop 3-Day Love Fest, it will be nice and warm. So we hope you'll come down and join us down there. All right, what do we have next, Dave?
I think it's part 2 of your
It's part 2 of my trip. Yes, this part 2, this one goes out to, I have to put on my hat here, this one goes out to the amazing Megan Powers. This tip is for Megan. It's the second part of the collage we started earlier.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here in part 2, let's go ahead and open up.
Part 1.
Following part 1, thank you. In part 2, following part 1, we're going to drop in this image. Now, this is like a scanned image. It's got like a piece of paper here, a test. We're going to drag it on top, and we'll just close this other image. Now that we dragged it on top.
Was that an iStock photo, Scott?
Why, thank you, Matt. Yes, it was. That's a photo from iStockPhoto.com. Okay. The image that we're using here it's got a white background on it. And we're going to use, instead of just using a layer mask this time, we're going to start by using a layer blend mode. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the blend mode multiply. The reason why is multiply, when you have a white background like this, multiply ignores the color white. So just by choosing multiply, we'll just click on it here, just by choosing it makes it see-through. And what's left is the text. And you see this used very, very often in collage techniques. Now here's the thing, if I drag it over to the right, you can still see where the line, the border is very, very clear here. So now that we've got the text see-through, we're going to click the layer mask, go get the gradient tool, and click and drag in the direction like that. So it kind of fades off. Now the edge, see how the edge faded off? So now we've got both things going on. We've got the transparency of the white background, then the nice faded edge. I would do one more thing here, and that is, do you see how his arm is actually, the text is going over his arm? I'd actually like it to be the other way around. So just grab the paintbrush tool, make sure your foreground color is set to black, and then paint over his arm. And what you're doing is you're hiding those areas behind a black mask. So let's just go over here onto his arm, and that way, now it looks like his arm is over those. I'm doing a beautiful job here, but you get the idea. You will take more time, I'm certain, when doing this, and we'll just kind of fix it up like that. And you could even, if you wanted to, you could shrink the brush down and go right down this little test tubey syringy thing. There we go, something like that, to where his arm looks like it's up front. Now, I used a linear gradient in that tip the whole time, but you don't have to use a linear gradient. You can experiment and use other gradients. You can use a radial gradient, you can use a Canadian gradient.
That's a donut-shaped one.
Donut-shaped one. Any one. It's a Tim Hortons, the Tim Hortons gradient it's called. Any gradient you want, so give that a shot. So that's part 2 of my part 2, but now Matt's got a Q&A for you, a Photoshop Q&A.
A Photoshop Q&A, give me that, thank you.
Sorry.
All right, so this week, my Photoshop Q&A, I'm going to actually steal another question. I'm actually taking this from Dave Cross's help desk book, and the question is, and I've actually seen it posted on some website forums, but how do you create a contact sheet in Photoshop? All right, so the answer is actually pretty simple here. If you're in Photoshop, which is where you'll be, you want to go down to...
Possibly.
Yeah, perhaps.
Well, no, actually, there's another part to this, but if you're in Photoshop, you'll want to go down to Automate, and then go down to Contact Sheet 2, and there's an option right there for creating the contact sheet right from within Photoshop. It's kind of cool. You get your little preview over here on the right so you can see what the contact sheet's going to look like. But in the help desk book, Dave points out a very good point. A lot of people don't know this. If you're inside a bridge and you want to create a contact sheet, you can go under the Tools menu, go down to Photoshop, and choose Contact Sheet there. Now, Bridge has an advantage over using Photoshop because in Bridge you can visually see what photos you're going to be adding to your contact sheet, where in Photoshop you're kind of just guessing. You're pointing it at a folder, where in Bridge you can very specifically go in there and select the photos that you want to include into the contact sheet. All right, so thank you, Dave, for writing the help desk book that I could use a question from. And you know what, one thing though, if you haven't seen Dave's help desk book, you might want to check it out. It's not just about troubleshooting in Photoshop. It's actually a whole book of questions and answers in Photoshop. So if you've got a lot of questions about Photoshop, there's a pretty good chance Dave's book answers them for you. And you can go to Amazon.com and you can pick up the book there. So that said, we got Dave on the screen here, and Dave has got another tip for us.
I have a quick little tip talking about a little trick when you're trying to use the healing, no, not the healing brush.
No.
Sorry, the patch tool. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. The patch tool, a little trick for using the patch tool more effectively. Let's take a look, shall we?
Here.
Thank you. Now, part of the thing is that sometimes the patch tool works great just the way it is. When I have an example like this, where the object I'm trying to get rid of is nicely surrounded by just sort of areas that work really nice colors and so on, then I should be able to pretty much just drag this over, and the patch tool does a pretty nice job just like that. And that's great if you have a situation like that one. However, sometimes you run into problems like this, and this is a very common thing, and people ask this all the time. You try to make a selection like this using the patch tool. I'm going to just use my Option or Alt key to remove that top bar because I went a little too far. And here's the problem people run into. When you drag it over to try and match up and find an area that looks pretty good, it's doing the blend. But look at the bottom. See how that's all kind of fuzzy because it picked up part of the building. And
I like that effect.
It is a nice effect, but we want to try and not get that. So here's the trick. It's very simple. You can take either the clone stamp tool. In my case, I'm just going to just use the paintbrush. And all you want to do is really just create some separation. So I just paint across to say, get rid of that. So now the top of the building I'm trying to cover up is separated. So now when I take the patch tool, I just have to make sure that I go right along that area that I just painted, like that. And now when I drag over to where I want to use as my patch, because of that little separation I've created, it should, in theory, do a much better job. And check it out. Look at that. It just did a great job of blending right in. So all I have to do is make sure that if that is a problem, just either use the clone stamp tool or the paintbrush to make that little separation for you, and it works like a charm.
Well, thank you, Dave. Also, don't forget to catch Mr. Cross out on the road with the Photoshop CS2 Power Tour. Where are you next, Dave? Where are you going to be?
Phoenix, Arizona at the end of the month.
He's going to be in Phoenix, so if you're out in Phoenix, catch him. We also have Burt Monroy and Ben Wilmore out on the road for NAP-sponsored tours. Go check out their tours at PhotoshopSeminars.com. Now, we like to end every show of course, with some projects for you. What do you do between this week and next week? So what have you got for the project for you, Dave?
Well, one big thing of news we have for you is we're always talking about Photoshop User Magazine. If you don't happen to be a NAP member, you may not have seen it before. So we've arranged to have a completely downloadable version on the website, from cover to cover, everything, so you can get a real example.
The ads
PDF,
and all, it's the
everything
whole
in there.
magazine.
And just go to photoshopuser.com and you'll see the link for the downloadable magazine.
Excellent. I've got a project for you that's kind of a project and a half. So first, one of my favorite photographers is George Lepp. He's an unbelievable photographer. You can go see some of George's work right now. He's on the Microsoft Pro Photo site. They have a whole thing on George, his bio, and his work is just phenomenal. So first go to Microsoft.com/ProPhoto and check out the Pro Photo site. And I have a tutorial there actually called like Little Known Camera Raw Tips. So you can do two things while you're there. Check out George's photography. Check out my tutorial on 10 little known tips. Secondly, go to lepphoto.com and check out George's site. George has one of the premier, if not the premier, institute for learning digital photography and Photoshop. He's got an unbelievable classroom. I was there this year, and honestly, it was one of the best experiences of my photographic career. Spent a few days with George learning, and the instructors he has are just incredible. So check out both of those online. Matt, what is your project for this week?
My project? You had two projects in there.
I kind of had two, but it was all tied into George.
We'll give them four.
Right.
This project, go to actioneffects.com. There's a gentleman, Al Ward, he's actually a good buddy of ours. He runs that website. He's got over 10,000 Photoshop presets, actions.
10,000 is the fastest growing actions collection. Okay, sorry.
So just go check out Al's site at actioneffects.com.
All right, guys, on behalf of myself and Dave Cross,
Bonjour, encore.
and Matt Rockin-Klaskowski,
See you next week.
we'll see you next week on the next episode of Photoshop TV.